Hello, this is Brian O'Rourke. Thanks for joining me today. I'm filming today from my office. Previously it was from my home, but now that I'm working back here at Monte Cedro, I'll be filming these from my office. Today I wanted to read a couple of submissions to the Book of Hope. I've put out a request for our residents to submit stories about hope, things that they've experienced, stories that bring inspiration, family stories, poems, songs, art, whatever it might be that strengthens you during this time. Memories that strengthen you during this time, and stories that strengthen you. So today I have a couple of submissions that I'd like to read, and we will start with the first one, which was submitted by Karen Egan. Karen Egan got this story from her brother, and she said that she had thought she lost it, but while she was going through some pictures and some paperwork recently, she found the story and then forwarded it to me, and I'll be reading that. The name of the story is Mayonnaise Jar and 2 Cups of Coffee. On the last day of class, the professor stood before his philosophy class and had some items in front of him. When the class began, wordlessly, he picked up a very large and empty mayonnaise jar and proceeded to fill it with golf balls. He then asked the students if the jar was full. They agreed that it was. The professor then picked up a box of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook the jar lightly. The pebbles rolled into the open areas between the golf balls. He then asked the students again if the jar was full. They agreed it was. The professor next picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. Of course, the sand filled up everything else. He asked once more if the jar was full. The students responded with a unanimous yes. The professor then produced 2 cups of coffee from under the table and poured the entire contents into the jar, effectively filling the empty space between the stand. The students laughed. "Now," said the professor, as the laughter subsided, "I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things. Your God, your family, your children, your health, your friends, and your favorite passions. Things that if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job and your house and your car. The sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first," he continued, "there is no room for the pebbles or the golf balls. The same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you will never have room for the things that are important. Pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Pray and spend time with God. Play with your children. Take time to get medical checkups. Take your spouse out to dinner. Play another 18. There will always be time to clean the house and fix the disposal. Take care of the golf balls first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand." One of the students raised her hand and inquired what the coffee represented. The professor smiled. "I'm glad you asked. It just goes to show you that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple cups of coffee with a friend." Well, thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that story. I think it reminds us to focus on the most important things in our life. And even though in this time we are quarantined and isolated, I think we all have had the opportunity to reach out to friends and family and connect with them over phone calls and Zoom. We've still been able to do that and connect with what's most important to us. to spend time in prayer and in relationship with God, and to connect in that way. And the things we can't do, some of the things that we've been limited, I'll tell you, brings a sense of gratitude, grateful for being able to do those things, and hopefully soon in the future we'll get back to those things that we're not able to do at this time. So thanks again, Karen, for that wonderful story. The second one I got from Mary Snare. She sent me a story about her family's immigration to the United States, and I thought it was a good story, good submission, and speaks to some of what we're going through, but also a different time, so completely unique in that sense. The story is called Hope for Survival. It was 1845 to 1849 when a blight hit the potato crops of Ireland and caused crop failures that led to the worst famine to hit Europe in the 19th century. Although prosperous Irish landowners weathered the disaster, more than 1 million people of the peasant class died of starvation. Typhus and other famine-related diseases. Another 1.5 million fled Ireland for North America and Britain. Irish population and economy continued to decline for several decades due to the emigration and lower birth rates. The mournful song Danny Boy, for you must go and I must bide, is sung by a broken-hearted girl whose love had to leave her in order to just stay alive and hope for a better future. It wasn't only the boys who left their homeland. Sometime in late 1800s, 2 girls, 13 and 11 years old, were put on a boat for America. There was no room for luggage and very little money. Conditions were crowded and dozens of people packed into the holds of the ship, trying to stay well with the rough seas of the Atlantic tossing them about for weeks. Before they made it to America, tragedy struck. The younger of the sisters became very sick, and her big sister did not know what to do. She tried to feed her and care for her and held the youngest sister in her arms while the little one died of the consumption, tuberculosis. The older girl was left alone, without resources, without any family. She was very frightened. Her mother had pinned a note on her coat which read, "Take me to the priest's house." Priests took care of the Irish children. As a little girl, she was a hedgerow child. In the early and the mid-18th century in Ireland, the British did not allow the education of Catholic children. Thus, the priests conducted classes behind the hedgerows, a practice which was illegal, similar to the teaching of Negro slave children in the United States. Under the circumstances, the education was limited to reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it was better than being illiterate. Being not completely ignorant, she made her way to a priest's house and asked for help in finding a job. The priest sent her to Mr. Walsh, a widower with several children. So the child herself set about the task of raising children. After a while, Walter Walsh married his young Irish nanny. Presumably she was of legal age, or at least a decent age, and she bore him 6 children, 4 of whom survived. One of the children, Catherine Walsh, was my great-grandmother. Well, thank you, Mary. That story is, again, an inspiring story of the hardship and challenge of immigrants to the United States that many of our ancestors experienced over the years in coming here, and that many still experience today in trying to come to America. It also speaks to those challenges that we face, and I know for Mary, this is one of those stories that she can draw from for strength during this time. So I want to just encourage us to continue to look at these stories, continue to look at our history, our family's history, whatever comes to mind that really truly inspires you and strengthens you. I know that these stories are important to guide us as we continue on our journey together and feel more connected as a community as we get through this. So thank you for your submission, Karen and Mary, and I look forward to future submissions and sharing those with the community in the weeks ahead. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.